That was Schindler's List, a movie that came out in 1993. It's a true story of a man by the name of Oskar Schindler. And let me tell you a little something about this man. He was a Nazi party member. He was a black marketeer. He lived large. He knew how to throw his money around so that he could manipulate things to his best interest. And his purpose in life was to make a lot of money, as much as he possibly could. He wanted to become filthy rich wealthy. And so he worked for the Nazi Party, and he was going to make pots and pans for the German army and sell them to the Nazis. And to do this, he bought favor with Nazi Party officials, and he used Jewish slave labor to make it happen. And God calls him. And God uses him. And already in that scene, it's beginning to happen. He doesn't like it. He's angry about what's happening and the way he's being moved in a direction he doesn't want to go. But he takes off his watch and he gives it to Itzhak Stern. Says, go get him. He hands over a watch, saves 2 lives. So we are in the second week of an 8-week journey through the book of Exodus. And we started with Moses in the basket. And last week we talked about God's purpose in our lives and how that purpose is deeply tied up in a relationship with God. And if you remember right, it's a woven purpose. And we don't always see where it's going or the whys or the hows. We think we're doing one thing, but God has a different purpose for us. And that brings us to week 2, and we dive in a little bit deeper into that purpose. And the next question that we have to entertain is, who is this God? We need to know a little something about him, who he is and what he does. And to get at that, just before the lesson that Mary read, I want to start there. So it's the end of chapter 2. And Moses has left Egypt, and he is off to his father-in-law. But God is still with the Egyptians. Is still in Egypt, and he's still with his people. And it says he sees their suffering. He knows their hardship. And he remembers that long ago he made a promise to these people. And he will not leave them alone. And he will not forget them. And he will set them free. And then we come to chapter 3, the lesson that Mary read. And Moses is out in the wilderness. He's tending herds. At this point in his life, he's 80 years old. He has been with his father-in-law for the last 40 years. It's been 40 years since he's been to Egypt. He is married, has children. He's living this reasonably comfortable life with very few cares or worries, or so it seems. And he's out tending sheep. And he notices, as he's out there, he sees this thing. This bush that's burning, but it's not consumed by a flame. And then he hears a voice calling him out of the bush. It says, Moses, take off your shoes. You're standing on holy ground. Well, Moses, he knows this isn't holy ground. This is Horeb. This is his office. He's been out there for 40 years. You know what the word Horeb means? Wasteland. He's out on the edge of the wasteland. And God speaks to him. And then he tells him why he's here. And that is a refresher of chapter 2. My people are suffering back in Egypt. They're hurting. They're lost. They're alone. They are in slavery. And I'm going to do something about it, God says. And you, Moses, are going to make it happen. I'm sending you to the Pharaoh to ask the Pharaoh to let my people go, to tell the Pharaoh that they will let him go, and you will lead these people out of slavery to a place that I have chosen for you and for them. And now Moses sounds just like Oscar Schindler. And even though it doesn't say he's angry in the Bible, you can hear the anger. He says, "You have the wrong guy here, God. I'm not going back to the Pharaoh. Why in the world would he listen to me? If he wants to put people in slavery, let him put people in slavery. That has nothing to do with me. And then you want me to go to these people and lead them? Why would they follow me? My father is the one who enslaved them. I can't speak to people. I have an impediment. I'm the wrong guy." Let's stop here for a minute and sing. You know, I hear this lesson, I read this lesson over and over again, and I hear so much of myself in it. And I hear us in it. It's really a tale that is just as modern and fresh today as it was when it was first told all those centuries ago. I mean, think about it. We have pretty comfortable lives. We have our jobs, we have our homes. We're making money, we're having children. Life is good, life is comfortable. Or so it seems. And then somewhere in the background of all of that is this God who, as he says to Moses, "I am who I am." He is the God who will be who he will be. And he's calling you and me. Now, you might say, well, he doesn't call us like he called Moses. There's no burning bush out in the middle of a wilderness. There's no voice booming from it. By the way, the booming voice, that's more Hollywood than it is reality, I'll tell you that. But we don't get those kinds of signals from God. You sure about that? A few weeks ago, I was at a softball game. It was my granddaughter's softball game. Rushed home to Fort Dodge and got to the edge of the field, and she was just getting up to bat, and we were having a grand old time just watching and talking. And as this is happening, I noticed this woman who was sitting on the bleachers with a child who was kind of running all over the place and kind of doing his own thing. And she had her screen out, and she was like this, doing this. And this little child, I assume that the older one was probably out playing ball. This older child sort of escaped and went through the dugout and started out towards the field. And I'm thinking, well, this is kind of cute. And I'm standing there watching this, and then all of a sudden, boom, here comes Mom right in front of me. Through the dugout, out to the field. She grabs him, not by an arm, but under an armpit, picks him up by one arm, carries him back to the seat, plops him down, calls him something that I will not repeat here, and goes back to her screen. And it just made me mad. And you know, that was 3-4 weeks ago. I'm still thinking about it. How was I to know that a dusty softball field would become for me a burning bush, a bush that never stops burning? How was I to know that out of that burning bush, a voice would call call me to something other than I am, out of my comfort zone, towards something that is larger and more important than anything I'm doing right now. My friends, you all know it. The world's a mess. There are all kinds of places in our world that just are not right. And God's calling you in all of that. Did you watch the news this week from Utah? The woman who went out to a park, and this man who has evidently been wooing her along meets her out there, takes her to his home, and no longer is she a woman, but she's an object. She's a piece of meat. And he murders her and takes her to the backyard to burn the body so the evidence is not there. And let me ask you something. You're probably asking, well, what am I supposed to do about that, Mr. Oscar Schindler? Are not the seeds of those very activities being planted right here in Algona with kids who are 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years old? Isn't it happening right here, right now? Couldn't it possibly be? It's your burning bush. The world's out of whack. People go to work and they have jobs where there's tension. People go home and they so bury themselves in their screens that they begin to lose their family. And they're hurting, and they're lost, and they're alone. So much so that they reach for the nearest sedative of choice, whatever it might be, just so they can dull the pain. So God wants a relationship with you. And now he wants you to know something about who he is. He is a God who sees the suffering of his people. He sees how they are in bondage. He sees their slavery. He sees their pain. He sees their hurt. And he is calling you. And I guess the only question I have is, what are you going to do about it? Let's sing. So for Oscar Schindler, it starts with a woman who comes into his office, who's dressed well, and that's his first burning bush. And it's a voice coming from God. And he hates the message because he has this purpose in life. And this is taking away from his purpose. He has this goal in life, and it's taking him away from his goal. And he unstraps the watch and gives it to Isaac Stern. And 2 people's lives are saved. And the bush continues to burn. And pretty soon he starts taking risk with the Nazis, who are very serious about making sure there are no Jews left when they are all done. He ends up in jail not once, but twice. He starts spending the money that he's earned and more to save lives, save lives, save lives. And the bush continues to burn, and the voice continues to speak to him until it ends here. Would you please play the...
I could have got more.
Oscar, there are 1,100 people who are alive because of you. Look at them.
If I'd made more money. I threw away so much money. You have no idea. If I just...
There will be generations because of what you did.
I didn't do enough.
You did so much.
This car. Kurt would have bought this car. Why did I keep the car? 10 people right there. 10 people. 10 more people. This pin. 2 people. This is gold. 2 more people. You would have given me 2 for it. At least 1. You would have given me 1. 1 more. 1 more person. Person stand for this. I could have got 1 more person. And I didn't. I didn't.
If you have not seen this movie, you need to see it. It's an amazing film. It's not for the children, I'll tell you that, because it's no holds bar in terms of what happens to the Jewish people during World War II. But you need to see it. And I want you to remember who Oskar Schindler was. He was a Nazi party official. He was a profiteer. He was a black marketer. He was in it to make a fortune and become filthy rich. And at one point, he is filthy rich. And he takes off his watch and he saves 2 lives. And the bush continued to burn until he has literally nothing left. By the time he dies, he is so poor that he is counting on charities from Israel so that he can just simply survive. And yet, when God calls, there's something that happens to our lives that creates a purpose that before that call comes, you can't possibly understand or fathom. So that what happens at home, what happens at work, what happens at school, what happens every place in terms of your life is radically altered with a new sense of direction and purpose. Because you need to know something about this God. He is out to save and seek the lost and to bring them home. And he calls you to that. And in terms of what we do here at church, oh my goodness. You know, council meeting all of a sudden isn't a group of people that get together, read minutes, pass actions, and make sure there's funding to pay the preacher. Something much more than that. Stewardship, not fundraising. VBS, not a program that we check off the list at the end of the summer. Because it twists with new purpose. And I would like to leave you today with a couple of questions. Who are you? What is it that gives your life meaning and purpose? To what do you belong? What do you invest yourself into? Or maybe a better question is, whose are you? To whom do you belong? And with that in mind, who or what is going to write the story called your life?